Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa ngā mihi nui a koutou ngā rangatira i nā ho hoki. Nau mai haere mai, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei kaupapa o te pō. Ko Peter O'Connor tuku ingoa, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, no Tamaki Makaurau ahau, ko Ahorangi o Waipapa Taumata Rau. Um, How exciting it is to have so many people join us here this evening for conversations about um, something I'm sure everybody who's joined us is deeply passionate about. On behalf of Aotearoa Educators Collective, uh, I am delighted to welcome you to yet another conversation about schooling, about education, and I'm thrilled to be joined by um, three panelists who will lead that discussion. Leanne Otene, who is the president of the New Zealand Principals Federation. And because I've been in a school, I also know a stunning principal of a stunning school. Michelle Thwaites, who's a principal of Russell Kura Porirua East, who's hanging on by her fingernails till the end of term. We shall have half an hour off before she starts cracking work on Monday morning, I'm sure. And my
Close.
colleague and friend, Professor Jodie Hunter from Massey University, who's been telling us about the extraordinarily busy few days that she's been having, sitting next to people coughing and spluttering next to her on planes. So it's a delight to see you here and to recognize names of. There's a wonderful thing about living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You look across and you go, oh my God, I haven't seen Christina for years. Oh, look, and there's Francis Nelson, and so it is. You know, the joy of living in a small country. Um, Today we're talking about the curriculum changes, which seem to be rapid, um, led in a way that perhaps we've never seen, in a speed that we've never seen, and the implications of it unknown yet. So, no prepared statements. We're having this as a dialogue for about 35 minutes with people who understand because they have been embedded in the education system for a long time. So they're speaking with the wisdom of the research, academics, principals, deeply committed to teaching and learning. And so, Leanne, I'll open it up with you. What's this
First of
whole
all,
curriculum overreach?
yeah. Well, hey, first of all, kia ora koutou te whānau, nō te rarawa hau, kua hau te manakura o ngā Tumuaki o Aotearoa. It's a real privilege to be able to chat with you all tonight. Look, I think we need to start by first of all setting the scene and just remembering five key points really. And the first managing. That our principals and are the leaders of teaching and learning and also change. So they're leaders of change. The third point is that they are experts in implementing the curriculum. You know, as a principal's role is to take policy and put it into practice, really. The fourth thing is that we as principals have a real deep understanding of our staff's capabilities and capacity to take on change. And that's important to remember. And the final one, and probably the most important, is that principals and teachers in their schools right now are focused on their learners. And through their teachers, they know what's best in terms of the best approaches in order to for their students to make progress. So that those are the really five key points that I sort of think about all the time. And so, you know, when we talk about the overreach of the government, I also go back to, you know, what's the catalyst for this? What is the narrative around these changes? And it is that this is about, we've been sold that this is, well, it should be about ensuring that our tamariki who are struggling achieve. and receive the support that they need. That should be the catalyst. And everything that we do going forward should be about those young people that need that support to achieve. And so that's central to this whole discussion, I think. And when you start to talk about the overreach of the government, what's happened here is that it's broken the trust between the sector and the government. We find ourselves being told how to teach, what to teach, when to teach it, and next will be where. And that is the case. Our teachers, we know that in order for change to happen, they must trust the system. They must trust the people who are making those changes. They must trust the experts. They must trust that the evidence is based on research of which they can identify with, and then they must be trusted to implement it. So, there is a great deal to be said about when teachers and principals feel that they've lost contact, or they've lost not control necessarily, but they've lost that connection with the curriculum that they are supposed to deliver to their young people.
Well, kia ora, Leanne. To be honest, I could spend the next hour just unpacking and unpicking what you've just said in so many different ways. I think at some point I'd love to come back to this notion of the loss of trust. And where does that spring from? And what are the implications of that loss of trust within an education system when there's such a big disconnect between government and the genuine experts in teaching and learning, who in my mind are principals and teachers? I'm going to flick across to Jodie, who, brings a whole range of perspectives to this question as well, the notion of the overreach.
Oh, kia ora, Peter, and thanks for what you've contributed so far, Leanne. Very insightful and thought-provoking as well. So kia ora, Jodie Hunter, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about mathematics and the kind of curriculum and what's happened in the mathematics space. So firstly, I just really talk about the teaching models that are proposed in the curriculum, which I think is something that we haven't had before. Previously, we've had curriculum which has aspects in it, such as mathematical processes and suggestions for content to be taught. In the most recent curriculum, what we see also is how teachers should be teaching mathematics, which to me is overreach. Other curriculums around the world have the content to be taught, but they don't have a description of how that should be taught. More concerning than that, I think we had a lot of work under the previous government going into the common practice model, and that was going to be basically a model of different approaches that could be used to teach. I'm not sure how many people had seen the draft. It was only released as a draft, but it had aspects like culturally responsive teaching. It had building up, your kind of affect, like a positive attitude towards mathematics. It had developing productive talk in mathematics, using mathematical practices. So it was a really nice model which drew on a large basis of research. It was very evidence-based and very research-based. It drew on research that came from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and research which showed what worked for our tamariki, our students and our konga in the classrooms. And that was put together by myself. I was in that group, but that's not so important. But it was also put together by people, teachers, principals, other mathematics education researchers, all nominated by different organisations, and that had been worked on over quite an extended period of time. And what I can see, the curriculum overreach I see is that all of that, which wasn't going to be in the curriculum, it was going to be another document next to the curriculum. What's happened now is that all of that work is gone, and instead we have in the curriculum a kind of mishmash of different ideas about mastery or science of learning and statements made in there which are not borne out by research. And interestingly there too, because it's being framed as science of learning. However, I do quite a bit of work with colleagues in the UK at Loughborough University who have a centre for cognitive psychology in terms of, or cognitive learning and learning science in terms of mathematics education. And the model that's being put forward in the mathematics curriculum talking about science of learning and things like that isn't even related to the type of work or research which comes from learning science or cognitive psychology in terms of the learning science. So it begs the question, what research is being drawn upon? You know, what is the evidence for this kind of teaching model if we are going to be teaching in such a way? Because that's now mandated in the curriculum, which is, concerning for me. And the other big part of that is there is so much evidence about the need for culturally responsive pedagogy, the need for culturally responsive teaching, and all of that has disappeared out of our curriculum, which, given the multicultural nature of our country, given that we have a lot of evidence already that we haven't been serving Pacific or Māori students particularly well in our education system, it's really difficult to fathom why that in particular has been removed.
Kia ora, Jodie, and thanks for placing that within one part of the curriculum changes. And I've struggled with this notion of Orwellian use of language, where we're talking about the science of learning, but we're talking about one science only, and a science of learning which has had its critics, I think would be fair to say,
Yeah, well,
over a period of time.
yeah, can I say too, because I think one of the most influential pieces which has come out of the UK, which is the Perry report, which has put out evidence and practice on cognitive and evidence and practice review, and I've just pulled it up, cognitive science in the classroom. And one of the key points that they make in the Perry report is that most of the things that they're advocating have not been tested in classrooms, that they've been taken under randomized control trials and labs, so that there isn't an evidence base as such for using such things in the classroom. And in mathematics education, I can say that's even more strong. Anyway, I will let Michelle go.
Thanks, George. And again, there's so much there, isn't there? There's this issue of trust. There's the misuse of science, which is driving a particular perspective on how we view teaching and learning. Michelle, you're dealing with these changes in a school daily. And what does it mean for you and your teachers and the students and the community in which you're living?
Yeah, kia ora koutou, and totally tautoko what has been said already. And Jodie knows I totally, absolutely agree with that cultural responsiveness and the need for that with our tamariki. And for me, when I look at, and my staff, when we look at the overreach of the curriculum and, you know, words like the whole cultural responsiveness, the te tiriti of Waitangi, you know, what we're reading in the paper currently about, you know, removing that aspect from our Education Act. And we look at that and we're faced with tamariki who are Māori, Samoan, Tokelauan, Niuean, you know, Cook Island, but also we have Scottish students in our kura, as well as Pākehā students who have been in New Zealand for a number of generations. And we look at that lack of cultural responsiveness that's getting pulled out of that curriculum. It's sad. We thought we were getting in a really great place with the curriculum and how it was leading. And, you know, I had a couple of staff say when we did some of those PD days around the new curriculum as before, prior to some of these big changes, it's like, yes, finally it's catching up to where we as educators know the best direction is and what makes the most for it, you know, gets the most out of it for our tamariki. And now we're sitting here and, you know, I'm reading wording like Te tiriti doesn't need to be in the curriculum, and human rights says that everyone should be healthy and have a good well-being, so we're going to remove that as well from the Education Act. And it's just, well, actually, when you work with children who are intergenerational trauma, why would you remove those from the Act? It scares me. And I guess too, the other thing we feel at the coalface is almost sometimes you hear through the media a lack of support for teachers. You get constantly things like, oh, we need to take away localized curriculum because it's confusing. Who's it confusing for? Because it is not confusing for kaiako, it's not confusing for whaonga, it's not confusing for Tumuaki. Hey, we've got a good grip of that. We know the audience in front of us. And yeah, let us, as you guys have said prior to me, let us actually get on and do the job, because we do know what is needed. So yeah, that's, oh, I have deep thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I was speaking to a colleague and a friend today who's been in education for a long time, and she said she was in a school in Tauranga, and she said teachers are broken, and they're broken by the change, they're broken by the kind of change which is coming, the speed, the sense of the loss of trust, the deep professionalization of what it is that we do. That government clearly have an agenda about what curriculum could and should be and how it's delivered. And I'm going to come back to you, Leanne, because you talked about the importance of recognizing the role and the power of the teacher and the principal as
Yeah.
change makers too.
Yeah, I just want to go to your point first about the deprofessionalisation of, the role of the teacher and the role of the principal, and this really saddens me. I mean, this is my profession. I love my job, and I know every principal across the country loves what they do, and teachers do as well. And so to be constantly hearing that we're not doing a good job, even though it's, the system has been blamed, the public see that we are the system. And, that's demoralising. And I am really concerned about the well-being of our workforce. And we're seeing that being played out in the fact that we've got teacher supply issues. I'm really concerned about how our young people, our up-and-coming possible teacher trainees see teaching. Because right now, all I see is it's a really hard job from the outside. And, teachers are doing a crap job is what I see, in the papers and the media and the narrative. And to a certain extent, we need to rise up as a workforce and actually say that this job is great. We have in the palm of our hands the capacity to, and I'll go back to what both Jodie and Michelle have said, we actually should be proud that we are raising a more tolerant society through our culturally responsive teaching practices. We should be proud of that, because right now I'm feeling that, things are slipping away when it comes to cultural responsive practices. They're slipping away from us, and we will be judged on that one day. What we do today, we will be judged on. So, look, I just think that I've got a real concern for the feeling of being overwhelmed by the pace of implementation. It's not pace of change anymore, Peter. It's the pace of implementation. We've got past the pace of change. We kind of have, there are schools out there who are ready to take on maths. They've already been doing the structured literacy. They're ready for maths. But there are many, many schools who are just on the beginning of, looking at literacy in their schools, and are not ready for maths, don't know what to do. And so that when I talk about, trust, it's not all lost. We can turn this around. And how do we turn this around? We involve the sector back into those changes. We value the voices of the experts, and in this forum, the experts are our teachers and our principals. If we value them and we invest in them, then we can turn this around.
You're right, Leanne. The notion of acts of hope, which are
Wow, I have
acts.
to.
Where they,
Well,
yeah,
we
I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've just come out of conference, and our last speaker was Gilbert Enoka. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he was the mental health coach of the All Blacks. And he was our last speaker, and he said it's all about attitude. It's all about attitude, and we have to look, because I think we're all a bit in shock when we started seeing all these changes, because we haven't seen this before. That's absolutely correct. We haven't seen a government that's had so much hand in the curriculum. We're used to working with the Ministry of Education, for example, not with government. And so we were in shock. And so now we need to kind of look at the bigger picture, and we have to say to ourselves, okay, what can we take out of this? What can we, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities going forward? How can we support each other moving forward? And the first step is to make sure that the sector is back and involved in the co-design.
So I think we're all agreed that this overreach has kind of shifted the relationship between the sector and government and the ministry. A good colleague and friend of mine, Rebecca Jesson, who's not a bad academic herself, he's a stunning academic, has posed the question, which I'm going to pick up. Could the panel, and Jodie, I'm going to chuck it at you. Could the panel hypothesis why there has been this overreach? Is this heading somewhere? And is there a deliberate purpose behind what is happening? Is this ideological or is it idiotic? What's actually driving this? I mean, do they just not know, or is there an agenda that some of us are really, might be quite scared of? Jodie?
Look, I'm not going to conspiracy theorize. Yeah, I don't know. I could. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of factors playing into it. I think, unfortunately, that there is kind of underlying think tanks who might be funded by particular organisations who are having quite an undue influence in terms of education. So that definitely is influencing what's happening. What I do think also, in terms of what I've seen, worked over in the UK for a number of years, very close contact with my colleagues in the UK, and a lot of the changes that are happening are very similar to what has happened in the UK. So this is kind of ideological swing, I think, definitely. And mathematics, I'm really, it's quite unprecedented to have, what's the way to put this politely? So I have said it before, structured maths does not exist. There is no such thing. It's not anywhere. There's no structured maths in any research. No other country is doing structured maths. So to me, it's very unprecedented that we had an announcement that there would be structured maths, and now it appears that structured maths is very quickly being developed and going to be rolled out next year. So I mean, this is what is happening. We're going to have PLD, which is being developed between now and January next year on something called structured maths, which doesn't exist, and then schools are all going to be doing structured maths next year. So basically, you're taking something that's completely untested, developing it at speed over the next 3 months, and then teachers are going to be doing this thing called structured maths. So this is very very, very unusual to me, an unusual approach, especially given I know with the common practice model, for example, that NZCER did, if anybody wants to look it up and is interested, because it's still online, NZCER did evidence brief for looking at the evidence in terms of mathematics teaching and in terms of literacy teaching across New Zealand evidence, and found and actually showed what is the evidence for positive changes for getting good results. You know, we've had Ero who did a report as well that came out. So we have all of this evidence sitting here. Why are we not using that? Why do we have a new thing called structured maths being very quickly made up? I mean, based on, you know, and again, we can take the science of learning and, like, in a lot of ways, I think there's, what's the way to put this? When I look at cognitive psychology, which I think is in fact a lot richer than science of learning is a lot of names, new names for things that teachers have been doing for a long, long time. I read like the Perry report and it says things like spaced practice. So spaced practice is the idea that you give children, you teach them something, and then you get them to practice it after a while. I think it'd be pretty hard to find a teacher in New Zealand who doesn't do that.
Well,
I mean, yeah, retrieval practice.
There's a lot of assumptions being made by government about what teachers are and aren't doing, which if we're really honest about, has been driven by the New Zealand Initiative, who are the fringe dwellers of the New Zealand education system, who have pushed an agenda that has been readily grabbed at wholeheartedly by government and is rejected the multiple sciences which inform what it is that we do. So that idiotic kind of question, I think, is a useful one for us. Michelle, in terms of what you might be worried about as a principal with the changes, what are you worried that New Zealand schools might lose with the implementation of these changes? What are we in danger of losing?
Being someone who likes a good laugh and can always happily jump on some strange conspiracy theory too with a bit of tongue in cheek, my fear would be that it becomes a whitewashing. That culture is so much removed, and that this strange, as we talk about the science of learning within mathematics, you know, we're just going to end up doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. That's going to be the level of it. That creativity that goes with looking at algebraic patterns or geometry, the excitement of finding them in a Tawaiwai or in a tapasa or anything, you know, anything that's interesting for our tamariki, you know, looking at a korowai and being able to unpack the years of intergenerational knowledge about how something like that's created, which is mathematical, which actually involves creative thinking, mathematics, and comes with a back history that's interesting. You can connect to New Zealand history, but you can also connect to things of significance and Tonga, and, you know, you could go down a museum track. I just see those things disappearing. That prior to this little, you know, before we went live, one of the things that Leanne talked about was that joy, that passion that's there. And that's how you grip children. That's how you get them in the learning. That's when you can go from their learning to the group learning to further learning. And that worries me. It worries me that those things will be,
I mean,
disappear.
as someone who's been engaged like myself in curriculum development for over 20 years, I'm looking at the English curriculum, which has got more detail than you can shake a dog at. It's just absolutely mind-numbing how much, in terms of overreach, right down to the elements of the curriculum, so it reads like a syllabus. But one of the things that struck me that I just wanted to talk about And I see someone just put up, we have spent some time talking about maths because we've got one of the country's leading maths academics on the panel. But I know that the ministry we're tasked with the job of looking at what the impact is when you start teaching the basics brilliantly for 3 hours a day, and what the impact is across the rest of the curriculum. And what they were asked to do was to load the time allowance so that science got a little bit extra, because apparently science is not quite as important as those other three things, but is kind of up there. And what they worked out was that when you do that, in terms of the available time left, other areas of the curriculum are left with about 20 minutes a week. So what that means is that social sciences, the arts, technology, health and PE are left with about 20 minutes. So what it means for someone like myself who's been involved in the arts for most of my life, that 20 minutes, when you break it down, is 4 minutes a day or a minute a day for each of the discipline areas. And so when we talk about the overreach, in my head at least, is that you kill any opportunity for a rich, balanced curriculum. That when the curriculum is sold as a knowledge-based curriculum, but you actually exclude from the curriculum other areas of knowledge because you've collapsed it into teaching the basics brilliantly, there's nothing left to teach. And that to me is an enormous concern. I know whether it's true or not that schools who send their children on outdoor education camps are asked by Aero to justify how they're going to fill in the hours lost, and are encouraged when they go on outdoor education camps to do literacy and numeracy at the camp. And so, I mean, that's not ideological. That's just pure idiocy. Um,
Yeah.
and the overreach where Aero are talking to principals at that level. No, if you're a charter school, you can do what the hell you like, apparently.
Mm.
But we
Oh,
can't
yeah.
trust public education to do the job.
It's interesting that you brought that up, Peter, because I was going to actually build on that just before you said it, which I was talking about. What I was going to talk about is kind of the richness that you have in dance, that you have in the arts, and the overreach that I can see where you're having particular subjects. And I am, a big advocate for mathematics, but you're having particular subjects which dominate, which take away from social sciences, take away from the arts, which actually, I mean, I think it's about integration as well. It's not one or the other. This is when I was teaching myself, and I taught for a number of years, I used to teach dance and connect mathematics to dance. But I think we're losing that as well because of this kind of model of you will teach like this, then it's taking away that opportunity to think about the creative ways that we can integrate things like dance, things like science, social sciences.
Leanne.
Yeah, I thought I'd jump in here. Look, I have been going into schools all year and watching and seeing the most incredible music, art displays, science, localized curriculum. I think people are finding creative ways to do the 1 hour of reading, writing, and maths. Let's be honest, those of us that back in the 90s, we integrated. And I feel very strongly that that's the way forward. And, this is a challenge, 1 hour of reading, writing, and maths. The opportunity is to take the other curriculum areas and make sure that that we integrate those. And so that's and I haven't seen any evidence in the schools that I've been in, and sure, I've just heard you talk about Aero questioning, but I haven't seen any evidence that teachers have turfed that out. And that's great to see, because as educators, we know that a broad curriculum is crucial for effective teaching and learning. While the core subjects like literacy and maths are fundamental, they can be greatly enhanced through diverse avenues such as music. We all know that. And, you know, music is both an art and a science. So, you know, and it plays an
Absolutely.
important part in developing skills like literacy and maths. So, you know, it is about looking for ways in which you can incorporate literacy and maths into those other subject areas and not playing to the playbook, if you like. And this is where, once again, those sound bites, you know, are those sound bites for us or are those sound bites for the public who, when they hear, oh, now we're going to do 1 hour of reading, writing and maths, the first thing the public think is they haven't been doing an hour of reading, writing and maths. And that's the first thing that happens. And we all go, but we are doing reading, writing and maths. It's in everything we do. And I think we just have to recognize those sound bites for what those sound bites are. And it is about being courageous as principals and teachers to explain to anybody that asks how that is integrated into our broad curriculum that plays out across the school day, and being very clear about and I guess not explicit but deliberate in the way that we do that. And I would like to think that is what the government expects of us. I'm probably being a bit too positive, but that's how, if I was in a school today, that's what I would be doing. And I would be making sure my teachers understood how we could integrate those fundamentals of literacy and maths.
It'll be interesting, Leanne, I guess when the textbooks arrive, and how that's driven. Michelle, are your kids learning every day? There's this kind of narrative where kids go to school and they're inquiring all the time, but there's no knowledge happening in schools. Is that true?
Well, I have staff that arrive at 6 in the morning and some that are there at 7:30 at night. I have a number I have to kick out, particularly on a Sunday night. Well, they're putting in a lot of hours and a lot of work. So therefore, I would be incredibly surprised if the tamariki weren't learning every day. I really want to support with what Leanne just said too, because I think it's really important that Tumuaki stay strong. You know, we are the educators, and if you're like me and you started teaching at 21 and you've done a wide range of things during that time, you've seen a wide range as well. And we know, you know, in our schools, with our tamariki, with our parents, we know what is actually really good and a great way of integrating the curriculum and delivering stuff and getting that passion of learning happening. You know, I had students' voice that I used the other day in my board report. And basically what the kids said about their terms learning, so these are a couple of year 6 kids, and it was around that fast fashion and business and fast fashion and how the effects it had on the environment, how children were used in certain countries as slave labor. And they gave me this lovely little spiel that I added to the board report. There's no way they could have made that up or just woken up and thought about it without reading about it, without writing about it, without doing some research into it. I know for fact these kids then went on to design and make and actually screen print some t-shirts to do this. Well, there's a huge amount of maths that was involved in spatial awareness about how to get that screen printing onto the size of their t-shirt, shrink their letters down to fit. So yeah, I would, it just doesn't exist. Every school is doing it.
Yeah. And that's why, Michelle, we just have to give our teachers and our principals the confidence to be able to explain that process, right?
Yeah.
And not get carried away with the fact that 1 hour is not really from 9 to 10 doing reading and writing. And then 10 to 11 is maths. That's ridiculous. And if that was the intention, which I certainly don't think, I would hope it isn't, you know, that It's
It,
ridiculous if it is.
it's a bit strange a year later, we're not exactly sure what the intention is or was other than the soundbite.
Well, that's the
Just
soundbite.
Peter, can I just pick up on something you said too, and Michelle kind of touched on it. So I think one of the things that is this kind of overreach has been this kind of dichotomy that's been set up over inquiry versus explicit or direct instruction,
Mm.
and child-centered versus teacher-centered, and all of these kind of dichotomies, I think, which I just genuinely do not think exist. So I don't think it's inquiry versus intentional teaching or direct teaching or explicit instruction. And whenever I hear this kind of inquiry being talked about, I'm like, that isn't what inquiry is. It is, in fact, inquiry has multiple meanings used in multiple different ways. But a lot of the time, what's being talked about is this kind of discovery notion where teachers are just saying to children, right, go and
Go and
discover
do
this
something.
or that. Yeah, that's right. And, so I think that's part of this kind of overreach. And it's also deprofessionalization. It's saying that teachers don't know how to teach. I mean, I don't even know why we have these words half the time, especially direct instruction or explicit teaching, because I think we should just call it teaching.
Well, Stephen Lethbridge has just put up the English curriculum
Mm.
states that there's 45 minutes of explicit instruction and 15 minutes of practice. It's bonkers. I mean, that's not that anyone who's ever taught knows you got to stand there for 45 minutes explicitly instructing a 14-year-old. You can't.
Try a
You can make
5-year-old.
teaching them,
was
or
going
a
to say
5-year-old,
a 6-year-old.
or a 65-year-old. It's so divorced from reality that it's all. I sometimes when I read it, I find it difficult to take seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but Peter, I think we've just got to unpack that word explicit. If you understand that during your music lesson that there is going to be some maths in it, and you understand the maths in music, that's explicit. You are deliberately making those connections between
Yeah.
maths and music. And I think that's what we have to do. And national standards got rid of that integrated approach. So we actually have a workforce that quite clearly hasn't had the opportunities that some of us have had to integrate across the curriculum, haven't had the practice, the developing of those skills to identify and understand how that can be done.
I
I
think
think I think Leanne too, though, there's like a danger there in the mathematics curriculum. The positioning of younger learners is basically that they're novice and that they know nothing. When you read the front part of that, it talks about this idea that children coming into school in phase one, and year one, year two, year three, are novices, that they don't really have any mathematics, and that the teacher needs to teach them all this math. So then at that point, then they can do richer mathematics. It is, embedded within the framing of it there. And that's a really unfounded statements to be making. Yeah. And, so that's the kind of explicit thing, which I think is really, it's not founded, it's not based in research and evidence. We know that our children entering school have a lot to offer in terms of learning.
there's so much to unpack
There is.
in all of this, and the richness of the conversation has been enormous, and I hope it's been agreed. It's been resonated out there with our listeners. So I've been doing a job of trying to answer the questions as they've come through, and I've just got a note saying, "Keep the panel talking." You're addressing the questions which are coming in our chat. So kia ora for that. It's difficult sometimes to see the good amongst things when my gut response to much of this, and then I have to take it back into my research mind and go, well, look, actually there's kernels in here that might be really useful. So, Michelle, with all of this that's there, what do you kind of look at and go, oh yeah, 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 that's okay. I understand that some principal groups have been meeting and have been welcoming the changes. Um,
when I look at this and the change that's coming, the goodness that I see in it is that I work in a kahuiako that is very um, open to professional development. They're a strong bunch of principals and kaiako around me who are passionate about education, and we are very much there for our tamariki community. So for me, that's a great thing in the change because we have each other. And they are a incredibly knowledgeable group of Tumuaki that I work with. So therefore, we can pull strength from all over the place and continue to deliver the best program for our tamariki. And I think, we've kind of kept touching on this. I think if principals read between the lines and grasp on to what they know still as good practice, I'm not saying turn off to anything. I'm saying pull out.
Well, I think
The
we
good
lost the last.
practice that you see wrong. Yeah, that's my good bit.
Jodie, have you got anything good to say tonight about what's been happening?
Well, I guess I was talking before we started, and I was, to be honest, when I was on the curriculum writing team that then got refreshed, and we were refreshed out of the curriculum writing team. But anyway, so when I was on the curriculum writing team, I have to say that all in all, in terms of mathematics, we were actually quite horrified at the idea of having 3 years of learning with a statement at the end of 3 years of learning, because we thought that was actually a really bad move and it went against what is being used in other countries and getting good results. And really, I think I'm glad actually to see guidance in terms of what should be taught at different years of teaching. So to me, the having that guidance of these are areas to cover at year 1, at year 2, and year 3 is really a positive. And if you look at the curriculum, because I know that I had a number of schools and teachers saying, and myself as well, thinking, is this what children are meant to do? But actually, if you look at the top, it says informed by formative assessment, teach students too. So it's still got this idea that it's about the teaching, what should be taught, as opposed to what children should be able to do. So for me, as long as that's not used as a way of failing students and saying that students are failing if they can't do all of these things, then to me, that's a positive, to have a little bit more direction about mathematics teaching.
And as we talk about failing and succeeding, and achievements come back again as a word that it's one of the ugliest words I can think of in the English, the education lexicon for all it means. We haven't even talked about assessment and the changes in assessment and how that will impact teaching and learning in the curriculum, and the notion of 5-year-olds being being tested 6 months in, and what the implications for that might be.
I think
That's another night, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think it was really good that was included in the mathematics curriculum, because it's evidently very important at 6 months for maths to be tested on phonics. Anyway, sorry, I'm being a little bit facetious here.
Leanne, what are you excited about? What are you going, well done, government?
Maybe I should have had that wine, but look, to me, we are faced with a lot of challenges here, and the really great thing that has happened over this while is that the sector has come together, and we have re-established just exactly what we believe in, and given each other the courage to say to our communities, look, this is what we're doing in our school. These are, so if we look at some of the data's been thrown around as a reason for all of these changes too. We haven't touched on that tonight. And so principals have been coming out and being honest with their communities. Actually, this doesn't represent our school, and these are the things that we are doing to support going forward. So that's been extremely positive. It's meant that that the sectors come together. There's been communication between schools and their communities talking about their results. That's positive. Look, I think that we have to look at the changes as long as they're implemented with giving us time, because we all know that we need the time to be able to embed any change, right? As long as those changes going forward include the sector in the co-design, we have an opportunity to save it, save all of this, because quite frankly, we cannot keep going down this track of mistrust between the government and the sector. We have to find a way, and it's not about us giving in, and it's not about, I think it there is on both sides. We need to look at what we've done to date and say, well, this hasn't worked. The sector has not, the research has not been accepted by the sector. The sector haven't been involved in some of the changes in the curriculum, so they don't understand it. If you want someone to buy into something, you make them part of the process, and that's what needs to happen going forward. So, I want to remain positive, because we need to advocate for this to land in schools, and I want young people to see teaching as positive. So, I don't want us to be going out there talking about how terrible everything is, because we need to have a workforce. That's the end of the day. We need a workforce, a passionate workforce that's going to deliver a curriculum that we're all going to be proud of and that our kids are going to love.
I work in initial teacher education faculty at a university where we're struggling to get people to want to be teachers. And so you're absolutely right, Leanne. When we are critical, it looks as if we're criticizing ourselves. One of the great strengths for me is a comment once made by Clarence Beebe, who said, if you want to bring about genuine change in schools and how they work, it takes 30 years.
Yeah.
And part of the problem, I guess, and one of the things that we've responded to as a collective, is that these constant swings between one way of doing things, here's yet another silver bullet, no, we're going to do this differently, we're going to do that, has wrecked a kind of a culture of disquiet across the sector, where people aren't too sure where or what. To change a government in 2 years, what will it bring? Or in 5 years' time, what will it be? Where will the swing happen? And one of the things that I kind of think, when I think back to BB, and that we had a consensus across political parties for generations, where we kind of understood what we did in New Zealand schools, which was different to anywhere else in the world. And it was highly successful. And so, my argument is not around this achievement, it's around the narrowing that achievement is rather than success. And the vestiges of that extraordinary experience and experiment from 1937 still resonates in New Zealand classrooms. Kids come from anywhere else in the world, and it's kind of like, oh, this is how it's done here. So there's a part of me that kind of imagines these changes will be embedded. But that culture, which especially the primary school culture, is impossible, because it's so deeply connected to who we are in this land, that we've actually created something which is very particular, and it will take more than government policy to dynamite that out of our system, perhaps. So we've been positive. We've been reminded by Leanne that we are the professionals, that we need to trust ourselves. You can see I'm in the winding up point of tonight. And Michelle, you've been so instructive and so passionate in defense of your community, of your children, of your tamariki and your kaiako. It's reminded me of, as Leanne says, of the vital importance of principals as leaders and their opportunity. And Jodie, you speak straight. Academics can dodge the bullets a bit, or aren't prepared to throw them. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for doing that and for all of you for being on. And maybe a last word from each of our panelists. I seem to have lost Leanne, but she must be there somewhere.
Maybe not.
Jodie, last word.
Oh, so
Before,
kia
and
ora.
Michelle, you're the last word, but Jodie first.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add in with a couple of things because I do think very much I consider myself a educator, having been a teacher in New Zealand, working in schools a lot, being in schools a lot. So I feel myself just as a primary school teacher as much as I am an academic. So I have a foot in both camps. And I don't think it's just this feeling of not being trusted from teachers, but I think actually maths education researchers around the country would also, and teacher educators would also say that we have this feeling that we're not being trusted as well, which is concerning, and this kind of division is concerning. But yeah, I guess to sum up, Claudia asked a question about has everything been fine until the coalition government got in and created a crisis where one doesn't exist? I'd say no. I think that we all know, particularly, that we have got ongoing issues in terms of outcomes for children from different groups and kind of outcomes in life, I guess, for children and families from different groups. So yes, I think that there's work to be done by everybody, but I think my critique would be that we've had underinvestment in education, we've had underinvestment in resourcing and things like that. And rather than take this one size fits all approach and dictate everybody's going to be doing something that, is potentially unfounded, we need to actually instead think about how we best support the schools that have the most needs.
Thanks.
And how we use our research and how we use the schools, which are serving the children very well. How do we use them as models for learning for other settings as well? How do we ensure that schools which are in particular parts of the country, like South Auckland, like Aotearoa East, have teachers, have a teaching workforce and aren't short-staffed and aren't having to struggle when people get sick? All of those things are what we need to make a difference.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful to be in a profession where at the heart of what we do is to make a difference in people's lives? Michelle.
Yeah, stay strong. Stay strong to the beauty that you do as kaiako within your schools and the work we do, because there is some beautiful stuff happening out there. There are some amazing schools. There are some incredible stuff that is happening, and it is teachers that are making those differences. And I guess some of that stuff we read in the paper and we hear that is short-term information, sound bites have been mentioned. Don't let it get in your head. Don't hear it. Talk to your colleagues and just, continue to be genuine educators with passion. We can do it. Yeah.
Kia ora, Michelle. Genuine educators with passion. Well, we've heard from that. Leanne, you now, because you dropped off, do get the final word.
Oh, the Wi-Fi just went out and I went, no, not while I'm in the middle of a
Government's been
webinar.
listening.
Yeah, right. Look, for me, I just want to remind all principals out there that they are the leaders of teaching and learning, and it's up to them to make the decisions around the approaches, around the curriculum that takes place in their school. And we just need to have the courage to go forward and do that. Look at the changes in the curriculum critically. Make sure that you don't take on too much. Be really well aware of the well-being of your staff, and make sure that they've got the professional development that they need, because a light touch on maths and a light touch on literacy is not going to do our young people any good. And just kia kaha. Stick in there. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's one thing people keep saying to me, oh, Leanne, tell us what to do. Principals, you know what to do. It's up to you to make those decisions for your communities. Make sure it's based on evidence. Make sure you know what your kids know, and you know what your kids need. So just go do it.
I would totally concur, and I'd say that to the teachers who are listening. When you shut that door, They're yours.
Well, that's
You know
right.
what you're
Teachers,
doing. You know what you're doing.
teachers at the end of the day are the ones that make that significant difference. They know what
Always.
each child needs.
Always. And not only what they need, but what they hope for as well.
Oh,
My
yeah.
good friend Stephen Lethbridge, who's on the AEC. I don't know what we call ourselves, Stephen. The mugs who meet every week to try and pull this thing together, has asked if he could talk about the next session. So, Stephen, you're up.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, we're the back office, I think, Peter. I think that's what we call ourselves. Look, some of the chat talked today about the work of Professor Guy Claxton. So some really good news is I've been in conversation with Guy in the last week and a half, and our October meeting or our October webinar will be a conversation with Professor Guy Claxton around the science of learning. Now, we've got a whole lot of energy and movement towards the science of learning, and who better than a cognitive scientist who has a bit of a critique around the science of learning, where he talks about the sciences of learning. So he will be fantastic, and I'm trying to tee up, so if anyone knows Derek Wenmuth, I'm trying to tee up Derek Wenmuth to make sure that he's emceeing that, so that will be a must-see event. So keep an eye out for the AEC communications and sign up for that. Thank you all, 4 of you. Fantastic evening.
Kia ora. You can all go and have that gin we promised ourselves at 5 o'clock but didn't have because we were doing this. Ngā mihi nui a koutou, ngā rangatira ia, ngā hohoki. Ko Māori e.
Okay, we'll try and wait for the room to clear.
It's quite a big room.
Do you want me to stick around for a little while, Peter?
No, not really. Go and have
Not really. You don't want to talk to me now.
No, I didn't mean it like that, Leanne. I was just like, I don't know. I've got to go to bloody Wellington tomorrow morning. There's like,
Oh, well, I don't know what happened with the internet. I mean, I'm in an apartment in the middle of Wellington, and
Yep.
every now and again it drops off. I couldn't believe it. Sorry about that.
No worries. Look, I always find it
Yeah.
really strange you do these things and then people sign off and it's like you didn't say good night. So that was all I was hoping people would hang out for, was just to say good night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
well,
That was, yeah.
it was a
Jodie,
lovely
thank you. Jodie, thank you for your insights. I mean, we had a meeting today with, we had our own Zoom with principals of around the country with Rob Profit.
Yeah.
What do you know, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite an interesting conversation because, you know, he talked about the fact that, you know, the workbook, for example, is on its own is not going to do it. You know, like he talked about policy borrowing. And, you know, you go for those tangible things that you think are going to make a difference. And one of them is a workbook and one of them is a program. But you don't look at the depth and behind it in terms of what's required. And, you know, those teacher guides are the most important thing. And those, you know, using materials and fun, engaging activities. And, you know, you can't have explicit teaching if teachers don't have the knowledge or don't have the ongoing sustainable professional development. Would you agree with all of that?
Oh yeah, and I mean, what I've seen the plan is. Should we stop recording?
Oh
good
yes.
idea.
Yes. Yes, stop recording.
You can cut it off
Take that
anyway.
bit out.